Are you fascists gonna lose? Oh, wait, that's not my theme song. Let's try again. You love her voice, you love her looks, but Melissa loves our comic books. Hi, welcome back. So, let's pick up basically where we left off last time, but to remind you where we're at, we're still looking at the second half of 1938 to see how the companies in the comic book field either responded to or ignored the success of Action Comics. We've already seen David McKay, Dell, and Eastern pretty much ignoring the new book in town, but at Action Comics' own home, Detective Comics, the pages of More Fun Comics have been seeing more turnover of features than it's ever seen. Publishers don't do this for fun. They do it because they're chasing sales numbers that they think are within reach. With issue 36 of More Fun Comics, the lead feature is now brand new, yet oddly familiar looking. The Masked Ranger is a Lone Ranger clone, one of the first of many in comic books. The Lone Ranger was a character who first appeared on radio in 1933, was very popular there, and who had just crossed over into the medium of movie serials. His first one came out in this year of 1938, so everyone was very familiar with the character's look. The Masked Ranger's version of Silver is a horse named Star. Instead of an Indian sidekick named Tonto, he has a Mexican sidekick named Pedro. In his debut outing, the Masked Ranger is already on the trail of night raiders who attacked a hermit for his half of a gold mine map. The Ranger and Pedro catch up to the 5 raiders outside and defeat them all handily. It's not clear what happens to the raiders, though it seems like they've all been killed. Before they died, Pedro learned from them that the other half of the map is coming on a stagecoach with 2 young women. Ranger and Pedro abduct the girls for their own protection and leave the stagecoach crew to be attacked by the rest of the raiders. The Ranger delivers the girls to their uncle's ranch and leaves to go find the leader of the raiders, but the uncle seems acting suspicious as the 6-page feature ends. The Masked Ranger was drawn by Jim Chambers. I'd glossed over Chambers' last episode when he took over drawing Jack Woods, but he had more pedigree than I've given him credit for. He was only 24, but he had graduated from the Pratt Institute of School of Art in Brooklyn, where he had already met and married his wife. In 1936, he had started doing pulp illustrations for magazines like Ace Sports Monthly, Mystery Adventures, Western action novels, spicy detective stories, and The Shadow, before he started in comic books at Centaur. This issue also marked the last appearance of the Three Musketeers. After Wheeler Nicholson had canceled Siegel and Schuster's Musketeer feature Henri Duval, Wheeler Nicholson had commissioned an adaptation of the Three Musketeers from Sven Elven to take its place. All of these names should sound familiar if you've listened to my earlier episodes about National. I've already talked about Sven Elven, Henri Duval, and obviously Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster before, and I won't go over any of that here. This last installment gets 4 pages that end abruptly in mid-battle, with D'Artagnan and his servant Planchet dueling 2 men, one of whom will turn out to be the Comte de Ward, and who has the Cardinal's written permission to cross the Channel into England, a document that D'Artagnan needs for his own mission. This was chapter 20 in the original novel. For the rest, you just have to read the book or wait for the Gene Kelly movie to come out. The same issue debuted 2 more new features. The next one was Gary Hawks, a young freelance pilot, earns a living by doing occasional test pilot jobs and by giving flying lessons. You wouldn't think that second part would lead to much adventure, but one of his students is a millionaire's daughter, and she gets kidnapped in one of Gary's own planes. Gary takes his other plane, the Skybolt, in the direction the kidnappers were heading, over a swamp. The kidnappers spot him, shoot his plane down, and capture Gary. Had they just let him fly by, the story would already be over. They could kill him outright, but they could use a pilot to fly them to meet the rest of their gang. Once Gary is untied, he tackles one of the kidnappers, gets his gun, and takes the kidnappers prisoner. In the end, the daughter is ready for her next lesson. No therapy needed. This 4-page strip was created by Rob Jenny, another 24-year-old graduate from the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, who had illustrated children's books before this, his first work in comics. This early work is pretty crude, but in his 30-year career in comic books, he would go on to work for 10 different companies. The last new feature was Lieutenant Bob Neal of Sub 662. Bob Neal was likely intended as a Don Winslow of the Navy clone, down to his having a chubby sidekick, this one named Tubby Potts. At the feature's debut, Sub 662 hasn't even been launched yet. Bob and Tubby are just guarding it as the night spies sneak into the shipyard to sabotage the sub. Bob is suspicious of the blackout that happens in the shipyard and gets in a shootout near the sub that night. The next day, he catches a second spy about to throw a bomb at the sub and punches him out. His reward is becoming second in command of the sub on its future dangerous missions. We also briefly meet the captain, Mitchell. The most unusual thing about the feature is that Tubby smokes cigarettes. This is something that good guys almost never did in comic books. Good guys smoked pipes, and bad guys smoked cigarettes. This was an unwritten rule of tobacco. This feature was the work of a writer-artist team of Bob Hirsch and Rusty Lehman. Bob Hirsch will only ever write this feature and then retires from comic books at the end of 1940. Lehman quits at the same time, but then comes back to draw 7 pages of material for American Comics Group in 1943 before disappearing from comic books again. Issue 37 debuts yet another new feature, Darrell the Flying Fox. At this point, More Fun Comics still isn't in full color, and Darrell is the only feature I'll talk about over both of these episodes that debuted entirely in black and white. An opening caption introduces Rex as a special investigator without telling us what that means. For the FBI? For the Air Transport Association of America? Anyway, he receives a letter inviting him to the mountain retreat of a scientist friend, and arrives by plane just in time to see the friend's niece being abducted, another abduction. Rex can't catch them because instead of following them by air in his plane, which seems like that would have been easier, he lands his plane, and too bad we don't see how this happened, because I'd love to see how he landed a plane on a mountain. The bad guys kidnap the niece only after trying to torture information about the invention out of the scientist. The scientist gets killed before he can tell Rex what the invention was. Rex gets knocked out and captured. The scientist's nephew rescues Rex, and then Rex captures the bad guy who killed his friend and finds out that the niece is being taken to a secret hangar. Rex sneaks in, rescues the niece, and finds out from her what the pirates were after. And this is the one really good moment in this story. It's not the usual invention of a new type of plane or a new engine or anything like that. None of the things you normally see in typical aviator strip. The invention was the Seadrome, a 6-acre floating airport that the inventor had already constructed, probably as a top-secret naval project, though where his funding came from has never been explained. The pirates now know enough to get to the Seadrome first, but Rex wins a quick dogfight against the pirates' plane, and the rest are captured by Rex and the authorities, who swoop in because Rex had already radioed them. This feature was the work of Terry Gilkison, an artist who had been doing cartoons in Judge magazine since 1912. His first work in comic books was actually a one-page gag filler in Action Comics #2, but he freelances around to several companies, mostly Centaur, between here and 1943 when he drops out of comic books. Issue 38 includes no new features, so let's look at a crudely drawn 2-page feature that had been running for a while, since issue 31, but I hadn't mentioned it yet. It's Ginger Snap, about a girl named Ginger Snap, who in this issue comes home, sees a note from her mother saying not to eat the cake in the kitchen and spoil her dinner. At the cupboard door, a silent angel and silent devil are both trying to sway her in different directions until the devil stabs the angel in the butt with his pitchfork and Ginger digs into the cake with reckless abandon. The only reason this is worth mentioning is the name of the creator, Bob Kane. Bob Kane had been working for the Iger Eisner studio since 1936, his gag strips getting published overseas in Wow What a Magazine and Wags. Ginger Snap was one of his very first assignments for Detective Comics. He will, of course, go on to co-create one of the most, if not the most famous Detective Comics character of all. Okay, it's Batman. At the end of the year, issue 39 introduced yet another new feature, Sergeant O'Malley of the Red Coat Patrol. I haven't been able to read any of this story, but I understand that for his first case with the mounted police, O'Malley is ordered up to Hudson Bay to find the renegade half-breed Frenchy LaRue, who is wanted for murder. I'm guessing he gets his man. This 6-page feature was the work of J.W. Hampton. This is his very first feature in comic books. He'll soon switch to doing cowboy adventures, for which he'll be better known. He'll spend a long time on Red Rider comics for Dell, though his last comic book will be an issue of Lash LaRue Western for Fawcett Comics in 1952. None of these new features are going to go the distance. Of the features I've talked about in this episode and last, Captain Jerry is gone by mid-1938, The Masked Ranger is gone by early 1939, Gary Hawks is gone by mid-1939, Jack Woods lasts until late 1939, Rex Darrell, the Flying Fox, flies away by the beginning of 1940, Lieutenant Bob Neal is gone by early 1941, Detective Sergeant Carey, Ginger Snap, and Sergeant O'Malley of the Red Coat Patrol are all gone by the end of 1941. Radio Squad will last until 1943. But these attempts to find successful non-superhero adventure strips will ultimately all end in failure. The last thing to consider about these new features is, where did all these new creators come from? Particularly the ones I named who had never worked in comic books before. As I read up on all these creators on the Grand Comics database website, I keep seeing that many of them worked for the studio Funnies Incorporated in 1939. I hear speculate that at least some of them were already working for Funnies Inc. in 1938, and Detective Comics approached Funnies Inc. to help them produce these new features quickly. And this will not be my last time talking about Funnies Inc. And on that cryptic note, I'm going to leave you